School policy matters. When school administration implements policies and procedures without thinking about the unintended consequences for staff, students, parents, caregivers, there's bound to be issues. I'm Educator Barnes, and I just keep it real when it comes to education. So let's get into this letter. I am a parent in Washington Township. My identical twin sons have attended school in the district from kindergarten, and this year they're entering 7th grade. In Washington Township, there are 3 middle schools, and middle school includes grades 6 through 8. Parents who have middle school students received this letter from the Director of Teaching and Learning a few days ago, and I found several parts of this letter problematic for students, for staff, and for families. So let's look at some of the issues in this communication. First sentence that I found problematic was, while things have gotten considerably better than they were during the height of the pandemic, some of our students are not where they need to be socially, emotionally, and academically. Duh, that's a middle school thing. I've been a middle school teacher for the most of my career, and it's a mesh up between, I feel like I'm in elementary school some days, and then some days I really mature as a high school student. Has it gotten worse during the pandemic? Yes, but that's a given. And then it goes on to say that structure improves the setting. That's all settings. Let's keep it going. So the next paragraph says, while we have seen a significant decrease in the number of physical altercations from what took place when students returned to school full time after the start of the pandemic, it is still a challenge, and one very strong link to that involves student behavior as related to social media and texting, much of which happens during the school day. I don't disagree with that. But this is just information. The first paragraph was just providing context. It was a nice introduction to try to ease you into some of the changes that are being implemented. And this sentence goes along with that. We know things happen. Kids say stuff on social media, then it turns into drama. However, that happens when people become adults. So kids have to learn, humans have to learn how to deal with these things. So let's see how we're going to deal with this in Washington Township. Then it mentions that cell phones can promote egregious behavior. Acts can be videotaped and promoted over social media platforms, causing more drama. This is true. There's a video of me somewhere on social media when I was in a high school setting of 2 students that got into a fight, and I am trying to convince the students to break up the fight. Did I want to be on social media? No. There's also a video of me tumbling down a hill when I took some students on a ski trip. Did I want that to be on social media? No. But at the end of the day, this is the world we live in, where anybody can turn on their phone and become a reporter. But what's most important to me is that humans, and that includes children, are taught the consequences of their behavior, and punishing everybody for the actions of a few people is not the answer, nor does it teach people how to behave appropriately. Furthermore, there was an incident in a school that had a policy with no cell phones where the student videotaped the teacher saying the N-word. The teacher lost his job, but the student got suspended, I believe, for like 1 or 2 days because the student broke the cell phone policy. So the other unintended consequence is that students may not be able to prove that something has happened to them. And sometimes we know that teachers are believed over students even when the teacher is lying. And sometimes that videotape is the only proof students have. The letter also mentions that there's a phone in every space and kids really don't need a cell phone in school. So let's talk about my kids. When my kids were in 5th grade, their last year of elementary school, they came home. They were in the same class that year. Every year as identical twins, they have not been in the same class. And we've actually let them have some say in that. And they came home and they were like, Mom and Dad, there's 4 kids in our class that doesn't have cell phones. They were 2 of the kids and there were 2 other kids. And my husband and I were like, yeah, thanks for sharing that information. My kids still don't have cell phones. We don't find it necessary because we do agree with this. There are phones in every space. And we have friends, because we have married couple friend groups, and they have kids who are in middle school. Some of their kids have cell phones. So it's a conversation that continues. We haven't decided when our boys will get cell phones, but I agree with this. But here's my problem. See, administrators say things like this, but then they don't think about their actions and their staff actions. Because we say there's a phone in every space, but then you have school administrators texting teachers while they are teaching. So you don't want the kids to be on their phone, But somehow you expect the teachers to be on their phone because you're texting them. So if there's a phone in every space, why don't you call the teacher on the desk phone? But you don't call them on their desk phone because you know that's disruptive to teaching and learning. So I want to challenge administrators. If you're going to have this type of policy in your school, stop blowing up teachers' phone, because I didn't like it as a teacher, and I'm sure that a lot of teachers out there didn't like that either. So let's get into consequences. Phones will be confiscated by staff anytime staff becomes aware that a student has a cell phone or earbuds in his or her possession during the actual hours of the school day. Then it goes on to say, if a student continues to fail to follow our cell phone or earbuds expectations, additional consequences will be assigned, and students will not have access to their phones at school for extended periods of the school year. So let me get this straight. As we are struggling to fully staff schools, and we're struggling to get teachers to teach in a way that students are learning, we want to add 2 teachers' place to be cell phone police. We want them to take cell phones if they see them. When I was a teacher, I taught middle school in one school district for 5 years, another school district in Indianapolis, not this one. I remember an administrator saying, if you see the shape of the cell phone in their pocket, take it. I didn't take the cell phone. I told kids, out of sight, out of mind. And if someone had their cell phone out, I said, okay, I'm just going to give y'all a second to get y'all stuff together, because it seems like we're getting out of pocket right now. I got to get this instruction to y'all, so I need cell phones away. I will wait, give them 10 seconds. I don't even do the countdown, they put them away. But that's also because I cultivated that type of respect in the classroom. I also talk to kids about appropriate times to use devices, because this is reactive. This is not proactive. Human beings, including children, need to learn how to manage technology, and this is not going to help them with that. Oh, and it gets better. The guidelines used by the administration will be progressive in nature, resulting in harsher consequence each additional time a student fails to meet the school's expectation. Now let's sit here and think, how many times has this worked? It hasn't. I can't tell you how many school policies say something like this. You got sagging pants? Oh, that after school detention didn't work? Bet. In school suspension. Oh, you still sagging your pants? Guess what? Out of school suspension. Oh, that didn't work? You got out of school suspension for 1 day? Let's go for 5 days. Like, make it make sense. And wait for it. The same students that we're going to suspend over these policies are the same students that need to be in class because they typically are academically behind. Then they're not always academically behind, but they could be. So how does this help the teaching and learning goals of Washington Township? It doesn't. And we're not going to stop at cell phones. Let's talk about physical altercations. The consequences for fighting will, at minimum, include out-of-school suspension. So we're going to skip in-school suspension. We're just going to go straight to you're out of school. This is a zero-tolerance policy. I thought we got rid of that after I got out of school. I was actually a victim of the zero-tolerance policy. I had perfect attendance all through high school. I would have had it all through middle school had I not been suspended for 5 days due to a zero-tolerance policy because I got in a fight with somebody. Mind you, I'm in this science class. Science class was set up, you could work ahead. So halfway through the school year, I had worked through all the assignments. So the second half of the school year, I was just writing stories in science class. I had done all the assignments, all the experiments, all the tests, because the teacher had work at your own pace. And this other black girl in the classroom, day in and day out, will call me a little white girl. Because what happened in 7th grade is my mom permed my hair. And anybody that knows me, you don't see it now because I got it pulled back. I had really long, really big hair. And she kept calling me a little white girl, kept calling me a little nerd. And this went on for half the school year. And one day I snapped and I just started punching and kicking this girl until she was like, stop, stop, stop. I get suspended for 5 days. Principal didn't know who I was. Assistant principal didn't know who I was because I wasn't the kid to go to the office. And so when I see policies like that, I think about kids like me. I think about students like me who repeatedly get bullied because the definition of bullying is that someone is harassing you over a course of time. It's not someone calling you a name one time. Teacher did nothing. So at some point, I was like, what else am I supposed to do? How many more days am I supposed to sit here and be called a little white girl, little nerd? Some things I'm not going to stay on this video because it used profanity, and I'm not going to bring those memories back up. Real talk, sometimes fights pop off in schools because teachers aren't paying attention. So instead of focusing on how we can get teachers to monitor the hallways better or give them some tips about keeping an eye out for these type of situations. Instead, we're just like, you know what, fights happen, we're just going to suspend them. If fights happen, how about the conversation shifts to how do we make sure that we're creating the best environment for fights not to happen? Fights will occur. I think that's a thing that can happen in schools, but I also know, being a former school administrator, that there are some kids that will never get in a fight in a certain teacher's classroom. Because I was a school administrator over a middle school. But in other people's classrooms, they would. And that goes down to classroom management, classroom environment, and the respect those kids have for that teacher. Because some teachers haven't earned students this respect. And then there's the closing. We're hoping that you will discuss the expectations outlined here with your students, as the revised consequences will be enforced on the first day of school. First day of school is this Thursday. To my knowledge, parents, staff, students were in this conversation. And if they were, which parents, which staff, which students? This is not how you build a relationship with families, by dropping something like this a few days before school starts and saying obey. And then the last sentence, thanks in advance for your support and cooperation with this situation. That's a nice way to say, thanks for your compliance, we expect it. Now, real talk, I worked in Washington Township for a year, not during the time my kids were in the district. I know Mr. Doss, I interviewed with him. He's the first teaching job I accepted. I never worked under his leadership because the superintendent moved me to a different middle school. I have no beef with this man. He's a very nice person. Anytime I've talked to him, he's always been nice. He always answers any questions that I have. But what I will say is that many times when these type of letters come out, other people could have some influence in what goes into the letter. I don't know if that's the case for here. But what I really would want is an explanation about the shift in the superintendent's cabinet. Why is Mr. Doss over just middle school and not secondary like he used to be? Why don't we have an equity and inclusion director anymore? Why didn't we get a positive letter to welcome us back to the school and explain these changes? That's what we should have received. And then there's the closing. We're hoping that you will discuss the expectations outlined here with your students, as the revised consequences will be enforced on the first day of school. First day of school is this Thursday. To my knowledge, parents, staff, students were in this conversation. And if they were, which parents, which staff, which students? This is not how you build a relationship with families, by dropping something like this a few days before school starts and saying obey. And then the last sentence, thanks in advance for your support and cooperation with this situation. That's a nice way to say, thanks for your compliance, we expect it. Now, real talk, I worked in Washington Township for a year, not during the time my kids were in the district. I know Mr. Doss, I interviewed with him. He's the first teaching job I accepted. I never worked under his leadership because the superintendent moved me to a different middle school. I have no beef with this man. He's a very nice person. Anytime I've talked to him, he's always been nice. He always answers any questions that I have. But what I will say is that many times when these type of letters come out, other people could have some influence in what goes into the letter. I don't know if that's the case for here. But what I really would want is an explanation about the shift in the superintendent's cabinet. Why is Mr. Doss over just middle school and not secondary like he used to be? Why don't we have an equity and inclusion director anymore? Why didn't we get a positive letter to welcome us back to the school and explain these changes? That's what we should have received.